Hello and welcome to the old garage number 58. Gosh, it's been 58 of them? Yeah, I'm Wild Bill. We've got questions, we've got some Christmas silliness, because I think this is going live Christmas Eve, and a shout out, so let's get on with it. The first question we have came from the Charles Giroux episode from James MacArthur, and his question is, so in the vintage car era, there have been cars that run on electricity, steam, petrol, and diesel. What other, if any, fuels were used in this era? Well, actually, there were a few more. You have, first of all, wind power. It actually goes back to the 14th century in Italy, and in the 19th century Britain. They were actually trying to use kites to fly cars to avoid taxes, but you have, as far as actual, fuels, there was kerosene that was used, also known as paraffin, and Gustav Ericsson being a good example of that, as a fuel for cars in that time period. It didn't work all that well. It made more noise and soot than actual propulsion. Also in the vintage era, I don't remember the guy, was it Thompson? I don't remember it, but out in Toronto, Canada, a guy actually built in 1895 a car that was a wind-up car. I mean, do you remember, back, 30, 40 years ago, people would have a Volkswagen Beetle, and have a little key on it with a little motor so that it would wind up, it looked like it was a wind-up car. And I've seen that recently done with people that have Coopers, Cooper Minis, making a wind-up car. But that was actually done as a legitimate car, if you want to call it legitimate. In 1895, I mean, it could go about a quarter of a mile on a wind-up, but that was tried. But more seriously, was wood gas. This came out in the early part of the 20th century, and the idea with wood gas is instead of burning wood, cook it instead. And in the process of cooking the wood, it would release hydrogen and nitrogen, both of which were flammable and could be gathered up, within, a container and used to fire an engine. This was used quite a bit by the Germans during World War II because they just didn't have access, to petrochemical distillates. And so if you wanted to drive a car, you had to find some way to drive it, and wood gas was a way that was done. But yeah, I've talked about that on some other episodes, but yeah, those three pretty much were the other three methods that were tried. Kerosene, on your lower octane, lower volatile wind up, and wood gas were also tried with some success. Okay, next question I have came from the Two Titanic Losses video, and this is from Vincent Basso, and he asked two things. He says, I thought I'd heard the name Andrew Riker. Isn't that the name connected with one first electric car? And second, love to video on how you make your videos. Where do you search to get a photo of the person you're talking about, etc.? Okay, well, let's address Andrew Riker. And he was an early pioneer in the American automotive industry and started off, with electric cars. He did not stay with electric cars. And keep in mind, he certainly wasn't the first with electric cars. Americans like to think that we were the first, biggest, and best in everything, but when it came to the automotive industry, America was not the first. We're not the biggest. We were not the best. We were way behind the rest of the world. The first electric cars actually come from Europe. I mean, whether it's John Todd, in France, or Thomas Parker in England, but right around 1881, but right around there is when electric cars started coming around. Andrew Riker was a good 10 years later. But he was, the president of, the American Association of Automotive Engineers, AC, and he was someone involved in electric cars early on, but he shifted over to gas cars and promoted them, and because of just the logistics as he saw it, that at that time, when you're looking, 1904, 1905, there just wasn't the infrastructure in the United States. There wasn't an electrical grid capable of supporting an electric cars. And even today, it's questionable whether the grid really can do it. There's a whole lot of Teslas showing up, and it's like, can we really support it that way? But he was important early on in American electric cars, but he then became more important with gas cars, and of course with Mercer. And being very involved in the development of the Mercer raceabout. Okay, and with that said, okay, how do I make my videos? Well, this is a lot of fun because I have in my library a lot of books, and as well as magazines. I mean, magazines from just years and years and years. And so where do I get my pictures? Some of them come from online. I'll admit I use Google Images quite a bit. But some of them come from my library, especially where there just aren't pictures of somebody, that I'm looking for, pictures of a particular car, I'm going to go to my library for those. And when I'm making my videos, it's really a combination of my library and the internet resources. I do go to Wikipedia, but they're definitely not my final stop. It's a good place to get some general information, but you have to take Wikipedia with a grain of salt. If you really want to get some good information, I mean, the Hannity website is a great one to go to. And as well as I use the Peterson Museum's website quite a bit, the Ford Museum's website, and there's a number of different websites. The ACF website, I have to use Google Translate because it's all in French. The RAC website, the association websites and the club websites. I use those a lot online, and because that's where you have the people that are in the know, and I know some of those people that run those websites, so I go there a lot. I think I'm showing some pictures. I think I showed some pictures of some of the magazines and others that I go. But there's the AACA, the American Automobile Club of America. That's another place to go. The Horses Carriage Club of America. And then you have all of the different other clubs that are out there for information and pictures, etc. Cars are, there are car fanatics all over the world, and they have their clubs. And just if you want to get the information, get in their clubs. It's there, and that's where I get a lot of. Well, I've even been the speaker at some of their meetings. So yeah, that's where I get it. So, good question. Okay, next question I had. This came from the video on the Battle of the Marne, and again, James MacArthur. It says, question for you: if money were no object, what 5 vehicles from the vintage era would you choose to own, and why? Well, you know what? I'm going to reinterpret that question because there are some vintage cars that it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you can't buy them. They're just not for sale. But I'd love to have them, and so I'm going to go through those. The first one is going to be, and these are no particular order, but I'm just seeing them as I think of them. And that is the 1907 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. This car was the one that first carried the name Silver Ghost. It was named Silver Ghost by Claude Johnson, and it is still in the possession of Rolls-Royce as a company. And I don't care how much money you have, you cannot buy that car. It is not for sale. You cannot buy it. I would love to own it. Oh man, to drive the Silver Ghost? No, it's not going to happen. I don't care how much money you have, but I would love to have that car. Also on the list would be the Ford 999. I mean, that would be so awesome to have that car. I mean, I could, no matter how much money I had, I couldn't buy it. But my word, I would love to have that car. And to just feel like what it was like, with, Henry Ford, 1903, flying this thing at over 90 miles an hour, and it's nothing but an engine and handlebars on it. That would have been great. And along those same lines, the Beast of Turin. This 1906 Fiat, I mean, an incredible, monster of a machine that is just, even today, is still on the vintage circuits, and you can see it run. And it's just an incredible vehicle. I'd love to drive it. Love to just, I would love to have the Beast of Turin. And in the same vein, the Blitz and Benz. There's another one. I couldn't buy it. No one can buy it. It's too iconic. But what a beautiful car to own and to drive, and a record breaker, a racer. A beautiful and a beautiful vehicle, a beautiful car. I mean, just watching that thing run, just that engine and those lifters are going. I love that car. And then I'm going to finish this with the Brooks, the Swan car. I mean, wow. I mean, what would it be like to actually own that and drive it? I mean, the Swan car. Wow. Could I own it? No. Okay. If I said, hey, here's $100 million, I'd like to buy that car. Not for sale. But what a beautiful vehicle. It would be so cool to drive that and to have that in my stable. Oh yeah. I'm all over it. I'd have that. So, good question. Okay, okay, those are my questions for today. So, some silliness. Well, boys and girls, for our silliness today, I'm going to tell 2 Christmas stories. And the first story happened on Christmas Eve in 1801, when a young man named Richard Trevithick had actually built his little beast. That's what he called it. And had made himself a motor vehicle. Not a car, but a motor vehicle. And it was Christmas Eve, and he shouted out to all his friends and sent the word out to his neighbors and saying, hey, I'm going to fire up my little beast and we're going to go for a drive on Christmas Eve. And he did it, and he drove his car, and he had like half a dozen people clinging to this machine of his. And a steam-powered vehicle. It wasn't really a car, but it was a motor vehicle. And on Christmas Eve, 1801, he drove that thing up the hill and down the hill and down for about a mile or so to the local pub, parked his vehicle at the pub. Yes, parked his car at the pub in 1801 and went in and had a bunch of drinks. And, of course, this was one of the world's first high-pressure steam engines. He didn't know, nobody really knew that you had to, quench the fire first before you stop it. Otherwise, all the water will burn off and the thing will explode. And it did explode. It blew up in the parking lot of the pub. Nobody was hurt when it exploded. It did explode. I mean, he had to rebuild the thing, and he renamed it the Puffing Devil after the rebuild. But that was Christmas Eve 1801 was the first joyride ever taken in a motor vehicle. But yet, it was in 1898 on Christmas Eve that a certain Louis Renault said, you know what, I am going to make a car and I'm going to just show my friends what I've built. And it was, again, at a party, and it's funny because Louis Renault, he made buttons. That's what he did. George Bouton, the name Bouton, button, but he was a toy maker. And yet Louis Renault made buttons and not toys. But his name wasn't Button, that was Bouton. I mean, crazy. But nonetheless, what happened was he built himself a car, his own personal car, and went and showed it off to his friends at a Christmas party on New Year's or on Christmas Eve, on December 24th, 1898. And he showed this car to his friends, and his friends went, "Wow, this was the first car ever with a drive shaft, ever." and they went, and it was just a really well-made car. And all of a sudden, all his friends said, "I want one, I want one, I want one, I want one, I want one," and they started just getting orders. And he had to get in the car business because of Christmas. And that's how Renault was begun. So there's a couple of Christmas stories for you. And so just quick shout out here. I don't know if I've talked about these guys, but Todd over at Project Farm, check out Project Farm. This is a really cool channel, especially if you're like me. You know, I'm a handy guy. I have tools in my house. I know how to use tools. This is a guy that will help you with your tools. It's an awesome channel, Project Farm. Check it out. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. Link in the description below. And that's what we have today for the Old Garage. And I will see you next time. Peace.